Hi, good day, and it's Wednesday, February 1st, and we want to welcome everyone to the RICO eDiscovery webinar, Document Review, the most expensive part of eDiscovery. We've got a little bit of housekeeping to speak to before we get started, so I will walk you through a little bit of details around that. So we are recording this session, and we will be making it available to attendees after the webinar. We want to have a dialogue during this webinar, so if you have a question while the speakers are presenting, please put that into the chat and I will look for it and try to insert it into the discussion. And of course, if there's anything that we can't address during the presentation, we'll either save it for the end or we can follow up with you post-webinar with any other questions that we're not able to answer today. So I want to start today's presentation by introducing you to the two speakers that we're featuring today. And it's always great to have these folks on the line because they're fantastic at what they do and they're a real pleasure to work with as well. So I'll start with Jessica Lockett on the left there. She is the Director of Review Services, and Jess has been with our team for as long as I can remember, but she has over 12 years of experience in eDiscovery, and she leads our team of managers who are also lawyers and also governs the entire review services offering from RICO. So she's fantastic and she's got such a depth of expertise, and I've been able to be lucky enough to work on many projects with her, so I'm really looking forward to everything she has to say today. We also have Sean Lynch, our Director of Client Strategy. And Sean as well has more than a decade of experience working with review projects, including supplementary information requests. And he also brings a breadth of expertise and knowledge from his work in the legal field as a lawyer and then, with our team. And we're really pleased to have you both here today, so thank you. And myself, I am based in Calgary, but work nationally for the RICO team as the Senior Director of Enterprise Business Development. And I've been lucky enough to work on many very large projects which have encompassed intelligent review. So I've had the great fortune to work with these fantastic experts and to learn firsthand through these projects what it takes to get across a finish line when you're dealing with multiple terabytes of data or just very complex reviews with multiple stakeholders, etc. So we're really looking forward to the dialogue today. So thank you for joining us and we'll get started. Great. So, yeah, Sean, Jess, let's start with just what is document review and when is it required? And I'll pass the ball right over to you.
Sure. So I think a good starting point, aside from when document review is required, is that why do you need to engage in document review in the first place? Most of the time when you're going to be engaging an external vendor like RICO or another provider, is because there is not the capacity within the firm or within the organization to conduct the document review by yourselves, right? It comes down to either a cost issue, a time issue, but essentially what it amounts to is that the organization doesn't have the capacity to handle it by themselves. And document review is, as many people on this call probably know, it's the review of ESI. And by ESI, we mean electronically stored information, and that can be anything. It can be meeting invites, it can be scanned documents from decades ago, it can be emails, it can be PDF documents, whatever you might have stored electronically on servers, in the cloud, on someone's personal mobile device, anything that exists in the world of your organization that could potentially be relevant to a litigation, relevant to a regulatory request, anything of that nature can be required to be disclosed under litigation principles, under regulatory requirements. Typically, a document review is looking for issues, privilege, PII, confidentiality, what might be called hot documents, those incredibly relevant documents that are in a data set. But at the end of the day, what you're looking for when you're conducting a document review is you're looking for documents that are responsive to opposing counsel's requests, responsive to a regulatory request, or if you're conducting an internal investigation, documents that are relevant to what might have been taken by a bad actor in a data breach, for example, documents that might have been taken by a bad actor who was once an employee. But again, it comes down to the identification, categorization, and tagging of documents for what they contain. As I mentioned, it's not just for litigation. It can be for any type of regulatory or internal response that you need to create. As mentioned here on the slide, internal investigations compliance, for example. But the point of a document review at the end of the day is to assist counsel with arriving at a set of data that goes to prove a material fact in a particular litigation, responds to a specific regulatory request, responds to a request for particulars from opposing counsel. The goal is to gather as many relevant documents or responsive documents as you can and produce them in a, let's say, elegant and complete way to make your lives significantly easier when you're going to speak with a regulatory body or opposing counsel.
Elegance. That's a that's a great
It's a new
phrase.
word for a webinar, I think. I don't think I've used that one before.
No, I like it. Just to clarify, PII, personally identifiable information. So just in case, there's lots of people on the call from various backgrounds. So if you're not familiar with that term, that really comes into play a lot with the data breach response, where review is required to identify any personal information that might have been released, taken by bad actors, as Sean referred to them as, and then there's a regulatory obligation to do something with that information, whatever that is, based on the regulation. So just to clarify what that term means.
For sure. Thank you, Jess. So moving forward, what is the purpose of document review?
Was this still me, Jess? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I forgot. I'm sorry, everyone. So as I mentioned earlier, the purpose of the document review is to assess the data that you've collected. So whether that document's been collected and those data documents have been collected internally for an internal response or internal investigation, the goal is to review the documents for what they contain and tag them for the material that's contained therein. So if you're looking for relevant documents, you're likely going to be coding towards specific issues. So this document, if let's say RICO does a lot of construction litigation document reviews, and as everyone who's ever seen a construction litigation knows, every single time there's an issue with delay. So perhaps your first issue that you're most concerned about is going to be delay in a construction litigation. Then maybe it's resource allocation for how a particular vendor or a particular construction company organized the manpower that they had on the ground. So you're going to be coding documents for different types of information, different types of responsiveness to ensure that they fall into the right pile to assist counsel in creating responses to whatever opposing counsel might be sending to you. Same thing goes for a regulatory request. If you're dealing with a supplementary information request, a Section 11 request, anything that is going to be responsive to those particular requests from the Competition Bureau, for example, you're going to want to be coding, or if it's the Competition Bureau, speccing certain documents so that you can ensure that they get to the place they're supposed to go to assist counsel with creating a response and informing the legal strategy. You want to make sure that as well in a document review that your review, or rather, let me take a step back. Bear in mind that when you're conducting a document review, especially when you're engaging a vendor on these large scale document reviews, as Tamara was just discussing, you're going to find a lot of documents that may be relevant, but might contain information that an organization does not want out in the public sphere or does not want opposing counsel to know about. You might find information while going through a document review that it evidences an internal issue with individuals, or a potential issue around a bad actor in an organization taking information away when their employment's over. Because of the way that we go about collecting documents, you're going to find things that you weren't expecting to find. And what you want to make sure that your review teams understand is that if they are to see that, you have a structure and a strategy for identifying those documents and ensure that they're not getting produced. Because you bear in mind as well, when you're depending on what you're negotiating with the other side, what you're negotiating with a regulatory body, depending on how you're producing documents, it's very possible that you're going to be producing documents that are in and of themselves not relevant, but they might contain information within them that is confidential, that is privileged, that contains PII that you want to redact, for example, as Jess was talking about earlier. So a document review and the strategy around a document review needs to contemplate all the potential information that you're going to find. And you want to make sure that your document review protocol, which Jess will talk about later, essentially the instruction manual for a document review, contemplates this type of information, these type of documents. Because you want to make sure in your document review that you're balancing your production requirements with your legal risk and your confidentiality risk. And you want to put yourself in a good position that if the other side challenges your production, you can explain why you haven't produced a certain document. whether or not it may be relevant. You might want to exclude not relevant documents from certain family productions because of this very reason, because it contains confidential information that isn't relevant to the litigation or the regulatory response at hand.
Okay, great. Jess, did you want to add anything to what Sean had
I
said?
just really wanted to highlight the building the legal strategy piece about what the purpose of document review is, because I think just to sort of maybe take a few steps back from what you were saying, Sean, there are certain obligations to meet, to provide relevant materials to opposing counsel if that's the situation you're in. So obviously you need to review them, find them, and hand them over. But I think a bigger part of that process is, while you already have to do that to meet an obligation, to use it for a purpose which allows you to understand your case that much more thoroughly. So, and then to be able to consult with your client on how to proceed. Maybe there's some settlement discussions you want to get into based on what you've been seeing, or this sort of thing. So I think that that's just a really key piece of it that I'd like to highlight.
Okay, great. Okay, we'll keep going. So, traditionally, why has document review been so expensive?
So if you can think back to, for any of us in the room, in the chat, who was, let's say, started practice roughly 10 years ago, like Jess and I did, even though we were, let's say, in the electronic age, there was still a lot of paper that you were dealing with, a lot of boxes. Certainly when I was articling, even though I was articling for this major law firm, a lot of the litigations we dealt with came in boxes, and the documents associated with them came in boxes. That has substantially shifted, but we still deal with a lot of paper on a regular basis. All of this is to say that the organization of data previously was, well, to the extent that it ever was organized, was quite disparate, and that data volumes were large. They weren't particularly well organized. You had data coming from many different sources, from share drives, from acquisitions of previous organizations, paper, for example. And it was a combination of poor organization, just by the nature of the way we created data at the time, combined with, I shouldn't say ineffective, but immature pieces of technology that we would use to conduct document reviews. Our workflows, because of the limitation on technology, tended to be very linear, which was, document after document after document. There really wasn't an effective way to exclude documents that might have been duplicative, that might have been held by multiple custodians, for example. And as a result of this, you had a lot of documents that were getting looked at 3, 4, 10, 20 times, or depending on how the review was organized or where the data came from, you might have had one review lawyer looking at a particular document on day 1 of the document review, and a different lawyer looking at the same document on day 25 of the document review. Bearing in mind, of course, that your understanding as a law firm from a legal strategy perspective has probably changed pretty dramatically from day 1 to day 25. And maybe that document is coded on day 1 a certain way, and by the time you get to day 25, it's coded a different way. So the linear process of document review created a lot of problems, just because of the way the data had to be reviewed. And bear in mind as well that as that legal strategy changes, the document as it's coded on day 25 is likely the way the strategy is going. So you now need to go back and find all the documents that were the same that you coded on day 1 that now need to be coded to align with day 25's understanding of legal strategy. So it made for a very complicated 2 steps forward, 1 step back type of process, which drastically increases the number of hours you need to complete a document review. There are still some types of document reviews that need to be conducted in a linear fashion, but it is few and far between now. And again, mostly because our competency with technology and the technology itself has improved drastically in the last 4 years, pretty much 4 or 5 years. And as a result of that, we're now using these very sophisticated tools to move us, and Jess is going to talk about this later, to move us away from the linear conception of document review, 1 by 1 by 1 by 1, into a non-linear, analytics-driven, AI-informed approach to document review. The goal of which is to reduce the number of documents you need to review in order to arrive at a relevant set, and to deal away with the risks and challenges associated with linear review. Again, that 2 steps forward, 1 step back. The large review teams needed to get through documents in a certain period of time. The disagreement lawyers can have on review teams overseeing that same document. Maybe the strategy didn't change between day 1 and day 25, but the lawyer who looks at it doesn't agree with at day 25, doesn't agree with the lawyer who looked at it on day 1. So the technology is designed to reduce that risk and to ensure consistency. And if we're consistent in our document reviews, if we're consistent in our legal strategy approach, our position when it comes to defensibility is significantly stronger from a legal perspective. We want to ensure that our document reviews and our productions are consistent, they're defensible, and that if they're ever challenged, we can explain why we did a certain thing at a certain time, because it significantly decreases the likelihood that you're going to suffer a cost consequence if the document review needs to be adjusted or redone, because you can demonstrate to opposing counsel in the court that we did it this way, we did it consistently, and this is why.
Well, you're getting a little bit ahead of
Sorry,
the
Jess.
presentation. So all valid points, but we're moving too fast forward. But yeah, I think just to summarize what you're saying, Sean, if I can, is that it was this combination, this perfect storm combination of increases in data, just overall in our data that we use on a daily basis in our work and whatnot, combined with a slow build of effective review technology. You know, and with the lack of effective review technology, there was sort of just this application of workflows, which was the same as we've always done them, the same as we did them with paper, the same as we did them when we had like a few emails to read. It was just like this linear approach. And all of that combined created the need to have these extremely large teams of reviewers, because now you had so much more to get through, but you're doing it in the same way, and all of that costs so much money. So this was the point, and you mentioned this, Sean, where things started to change, at least, you know, in our market about 5 years ago, I'd say. And that's where we're going to talk about in the next slide.
And just a quick question coming in. Do you feel like, you know, over the last couple of years, especially, that the data volumes have just been prohibitive for, you know, traditional methods or not using available technology?
Oh, absolutely.
100%.
Yeah.
Prohibitive.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, and Jess will get to the case studies at the end, but, you know, we routinely now see document sets that are, I mean, when Jess and I started in document review and project management, I'd say a large file would have been like 100,000 documents.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, 500,000 would have been a huge number of documents. 100,000 was considered large. Now we routinely see document sets that are 1.2, 1.5, 4 million, 6 million documents.
Yeah,
it's not unusual to see that. And that's even called down. And Tamara, you know this from the files we've worked on. We've had document sets with initial collections that were 50 million documents. You know, so completely impossible to conduct a linear review on that scale. One, you wouldn't have the cost would be mind-blowing, but not just the cost, the organizational needs to review that number of documents, the team size, the time frame, trying to ensure any sort of consistency would be impossible. The statistically impossible. And the tools that we use. Sorry, Jess, go ahead, please.
Areas like there's certain areas of law, you know, like employment and labor, family law, certain areas of law where, you know, review of documents still needs to occur, but those are still in such a small step. But when we're talking about you know, these large enterprise organizations that have, you know, 500 employees, 1,000 employees, and all of the data they're producing every day, that's what we're talking about. And there's absolutely no way that any traditional method can be applied to that and with any reasonability. It's impossible.
Okay, we'll keep going.
Okay.
So, you know, what are the advanced review technologies that are available today? Let's dig into the tech side of things.
Sure. So there are kind of a multitudinous array of tools that we use nowadays. They're from collections tools to processing tools, hosting platforms, different plugins for hosting platforms. What the market is showing though is that more sophisticated review tools and more sophisticated pieces of technology are incredibly desirable. Anything that you can use to substantially reduce the number of documents you need to review in a litigation helps with a number of things. It helps with cost, proportionality, and consistency. When it comes to collections tools previously were limited to a small set of tools that you could use. Now in the market, there's Office 365 Collect, there's Relativity One Collect. RICO uses a tool called Celebrate. There are a number of different tools on the market to assist in the collection of data. And one of the things that I think is often glossed over when it comes to e-discovery and data management generally is that the way you identify and collect data is incredibly important. Identifying data, identifying your custodians, ensuring that you know the people who are involved in something, you know the people who are likely to have touched potentially relevant material or potentially responsive material is just one step in the process. Once you identify that, you need to collect it from a forensic perspective. And by that, I mean you need to ensure that you're using a tool that is not going to change the metadata, that's not going to break the links that might exist between one individual and another from an access perspective within a server environment or within a cloud environment, for example. You want to ensure that the data as it sits on a server or in the cloud, once you copy that and move that over to a processing tool, it looks exactly the same. There's a reason why in e-discovery we call it creating a forensic image. It's because it is an exact replica. It is a picture of what existed here before you move it here. And one of the challenges right now in the world of moving to the cloud that we're dealing with is that there are significant problems associated with what's called lift and shift. And lift and shift is taking things from a server and putting them in the cloud. One of the problems with that is if it isn't done correctly, if it isn't done by an experienced IT team, if it isn't done with the consultation of an e-discovery provider like RICO, for example, you can lift and shift and destroy all of your metadata, which means that there might be significant spoliation concerns around that. There could be challenges to existing litigation if you need to go back and recollect to answer additional particulars, or if the scope of the litigation expands, it can present serious problems. So the idea of collection, preserving metadata, sorry, Jess.
Team's ability. I said it, and it, to bring it back to review, like that affects the review team's ability to, affect a product that is expected. That's
absolutely
required.
and defensible.
Exactly.
So the sophisticated review tools that we use at RICO, we use a tool called Relativity One, which arguably at the moment is the most sophisticated platform that you can use for large-scale e-discovery or large-scale document reviews. We also use processing tools within Relativity One and within a platform called Nuix. These are the most sophisticated tools that are on the market. And by sophistication, what we're really talking about is the ability of the tool to limit the amount of data that you need to look at while preserving all of the metadata and the defensible principles we were discussing earlier. That's what sophistication means in the e-discovery and legal market. The integration of artificial intelligence and machine learning is incredibly important. When I started giving presentations like this about 5 years ago, I told everyone who was listening that if you have a vendor who's telling you they're using artificial intelligence, they're probably lying to you. The technology has changed dramatically in the last 4 years. Artificial intelligence now and machine learning are tools that we use every single day within our document reviews at RICO. It's standard practice. RICO's is called Relativities is called active learning. It's one of the various tools that is on the market. But we use it constantly because it is a statistically verifiable review tool that can be used to ensure consistency, quality across the entire review set, and significantly reduces overall cost. There is very little downside to using artificial intelligence. And most importantly, I know that there's often a kind of a knee-jerk reaction in the legal field, a fear of artificial intelligence or machine learning. And what's key to remember is that an AI tool, a machine learning tool, doesn't know the answer to a question unless you tell it what the answer is. It doesn't know what's relevant and not relevant until you tell it. It needs to be trained. It needs to learn from all of the lawyers who are working on a set. And Jess will get into this later when she talks about review strategy and how you use a review team and employ artificial intelligence. But essentially, artificial intelligence is just a way to magnify the understanding of the legal team onto a set of data to reduce how many times you need to look at documents that are similar to each other. And as a result of doing that, decreases your risk overall because you're not in a position where you're going to be producing a data set that's overly not relevant. It also increases the defensibility because you can prove that the tool is working properly when you get to a production state. You can prove that the tool is listening to the lawyers that are teaching it. And that's what I mean by statistically verifiable. So we'll get into all of this a little bit more in depth later, but those are the types of technologies that are available today, and those are kind of the benefits that they're giving us.
Yeah, and also just to point out too, that this isn't now just the straight line. This is what we have. It's constantly evolving, constantly developing. There's still, I would say, a lack of some great tools around like cell phone text messaging collection.
Mm-hmm.
That's being currently worked on and developed, and that's going to be amazing when that happens. So there's just, and then there's going to be, there'll be new things that come up in the next couple of years that we've never even contemplated today. So it's, you have to really keep on top of what's new, what's changing, what updates are happening, and which is a lot, but it's exciting. Yeah.
And there is a tremendous appetite in the market. So as Jess says, these things are constantly changing. Relativity, for example, last week released their semantic analysis plugin for Relativity 1. So the tool is designed to help you tell whether or not certain conversations and certain emails are generally positive in the way they're talking about something or negative in the way they're talking about something, to help identify bad actors, whether or not someone might be trying to deceive a regulatory authority or deceive their boss. And the tool is designed to assist in that, to identify those types of documents that might exist in a data set. So it's incremental changes now, but it's all iterative. We're learning day by day what works better in certain types of AI-based environments and getting better at it as a result of that work.
Fantastic. And it's kind of fascinating as well, because you think about how the workforce is getting younger and younger, and so tend to steer away from email more towards text, chat, any other types of applications. So that ability to try to understand tone and read tone, that's pretty groundbreaking stuff. So fantastic.
And read emojis, which is the next thing.
Yeah, great. Okay, so let's keep going. So what is the structure of an effective document review?
So I think I'll jump in. So Sean has been sort of alluding and mentioning a few things here, but moving away from the linear structure and moving into sort of like a multifaceted team, multifaceted workflows. And what I mean by that is that you've got different perspectives coming into the team. You might have a review team sort of tasked with 10 different workflows, and they're kind of working together but separate and communicating with each other. So it's not just 50 people in a room and everyone's just doing the same thing. It's very multifaceted, and that is what brings about the more positive effect of a document review, the more efficient document review. And on that note too, in what we've seen, at least at RICO and compared to some previous experiences, is that when we bring in collaboration between all the parties, and particularly bring it in early, there's such a positive effect on efficiencies that can be found early on. So bringing in internal counsel, external counsel, the review team manager, and maybe some senior review team lawyers, perhaps IT, perhaps a collections consultant, or case managers, people who are experts in the technology, and bringing them all together. That's where I've seen in traditional methods, they've been very siloed. And so when we bring them together, it just increases the efficiencies like exponentially. Then
Sean, did you want to add to that? Or sorry, keep going.
No, that's okay.
Sean,
Yeah,
anything to add?
I would say that
Frozen a little bit.
sorry.
Oh, you froze a little bit. Sorry.
Oh no.
You're good. You're good.
Oh, good. Okay. Sorry. I think that the tools that we have, just building on kind of the AI conversation we were having earlier, the tools that we're using now allow for this type of structure to exist. Previously, it would have been, very linear, back and forth, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. The tools now, as Jess explained, allows us to have these highly collaborative teams that work together in training the model when it comes to developing the AI model to determine relevance, and allows for a level of collaboration that would not have been possible before. It allows for the system to determine whether or not different counsel are disagreeing with each other on the way to code certain documents. And as a result of doing that, it really helps align the legal strategy in a way that would not have been possible 5 years ago. So again, you can ensure that, 1, that the model's working correctly, 2, that lawyers are coding documents the same way, 3, it creates great conversations around strategy. Especially as you have maybe 2 different lawyers on a file reviewing a document set that Jess's team has reviewed, for example, and not agreeing on certain documents. And then we can go to them and say, guys, you're not agreeing on these. Is there a reason why? Do we need to adjust the document review? And they might have a conversation and realize that the strategy needs to change based on the documents they're seeing. That would not have been possible 5 years ago. And more importantly, once they make that decision change, we can change the model to ensure that all of the document coding that has been done gets updated, that the model shifts to adjust to the strategy. And that's something that can happen in the course of hours, not weeks, by using the tools that we have at our disposal now. So the collaboration both between the external review team, internal counsel, external counsel, and even the attorneys within the external and internal counsel teams, the collaboration that is fostered by the use of these tools is really quite incredible.
Yeah. Okay, great. Anything else, Jess, from you?
No, thank you for that, Sean. Totally agree. So, I mean, well, we can just jump right into what is intelligent review, because it sort of flows exactly with what you were just saying, Sean. About the tools allowing us to bring about this agility to a review workflow, to a review approach. And I just want to point out, so step back for a second. Intelligent review. So at RICO's Intelligent Review, this was born about 6 to 7 years ago at RICO, and it really is the marrying of people, process, technology. And I know that's those sort of buzzwords that everybody talks about, people, process, technology. But the intelligent review strategy, I guess, the service that we provide using those 3 things is quite unique. And I would say it's not simply about, having the right people, having the right technology, and having the right process. It's about having processes that can mold and move based on the people manipulating the technology in the most effective way. So yes, something like Relativity One's active learning is an amazing tool. It's a great tool. It's wonderful. And there are certain workflows that are sort of as standard workflows. But what we've done is we've taken the expertise of our people and kind of manipulated those workflows in a way that we have found have brought about even more efficiencies. So, so to that point, essentially what we do with Intelligent Review is we really try to get our clients to bring our team in at the earliest stages. We found that the earliest involvement that the Intelligent Review team has, and I'm talking even pre-collections, we see those efficiencies get brought down the line. So that involves, project planning, data analysis, the workflow creation, all of that stuff. And like I mentioned, using the most appropriate tools. And I say appropriate because active learning is not necessarily the most appropriate tool for all types of data. So, you know, we have to remember, you know, you might have 1 million documents, but you're going to have maybe 700,000 of those documents that are going to be what we call active learning eligible. And those are documents that are text rich enough for the concepts to be understood by the technology. So that still leaves you with 300,000 documents that, you know, still need to be reviewed and looked at in some capacity. So there are other tools and workflows that we sort of, you know, approach those types of documents with. And all of that is very dependent on the file. Like it's not a one size fits all. So that assessment, you know, that the intelligent review assessment of the data is very, very important to inform what those workflows are going to look like. And like I said, just establishing those agile workflows. Like Sean said, he mentioned, you know, on day 25, something could be found and looked at by a senior lawyer on the file and realize, oh, you know, there's this whole separate issue we hadn't even contemplated or we thought didn't exist, or you know, or whatever that is. So we had ways to be agile enough that we can, you know, quickly revert and use the technology to ensure that we're not, you know, quote, wasting time and money, to be as efficient in those changes as possible.
Yeah, and I would say that, you know, further to what Jess is saying, that the data is, this might sound a little bit silly, but the data is going to tell you what it needs and what tool is most appropriate. As I was mentioning earlier around collections and identification of documents, when you pull all of those types of data sources together, you're going to have really disparate data, really disparate types of data. You're going to have emails, you're going to have documents that are very text rich, that have, you know, you're going to have PDFs of contracts and PDFs of meeting minutes and things of that nature. Those are really great documents for tools like active learning and tools like artificial intelligence. When you get to Excel types files, or if you're in a construction litigation, images, like those types of files are not really workable from an artificial intelligence perspective for a number of reasons, mostly because for an image, for example, a piece of artificial intelligence can't see what an image is. It can't assess it like a person can. So there are limitations to what the tool can do. And that's where the strategy and the collaboration and teamwork from an intelligent review perspective really comes into play. And getting involved earlier, as Jess said, really allows the team to develop a strategy for the document review, because we're all concerned from a legal perspective of, you know, what's defensible, what's proportional. Do we really want to spend $300,000 looking at 100,000 images, for example? Do we want to spend $200,000 reviewing Excel documents? And these are things that a well-structured review can assist counsel in making those decisions. What's worth it, what isn't? And that really helps keep costs down and proportionality up, because you're ensuring that what you're producing is in fact defensible and proportional.
Right, and just on to that point as well, you know, when we're talking about outside of productions, you know, having to understand like what the true need, like what's the true need of this document review? What are you trying to get out of it and for what purpose? And understanding that at the early stage, that's what really helps not only inform the review, but continuing to see ways that we can say, you know what, this doesn't really fit with the strategy. Maybe you're just preparing for mediation and you don't have a production requirement in the same way. So, you know, there might not be the same one size fits all path. And so this is where the intelligent review workflow comes into place, is knowing that starting from the end, right? Start from the end and work your way towards it.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, and one other component of that as well is that, you know, I think there's often a conception from just participants in this legal space that, well, we'll just throw everything into the tool and the tool will do it.
Yeah.
And it isn't that. That's kind of the equivalent of saying, well, we'll just throw a whole bunch of lawyers at it and what comes out the other side will be fine. I think anyone on this call who's been involved in a document review of any size knows that that isn't the solution to the problem. And I think that the goal of artificial intelligence and machine learning is to make our lives easier. It's not to make them easy, because an easy button does not exist, but it is there to make our lives easier. And being able to, as Jess said earlier, manipulate the tool to serve the purposes of the review and to better understand what clients are looking for when it comes to the output of the review. And as Jeff said, maybe you don't need a full review, you're just going into witness questioning. Maybe you're just looking for specific types of documents. You don't need to do a full review now. Maybe you don't want to because you haven't talked to any of the witnesses yet, and you don't know what your strategy is going to be. So there are ways to...
maybe you're preparing for mediation, but you think you don't need a bunch of things. But if your plan is to, think about the next step into arbitration, you might think, well, we don't want to have to redo this.
Yeah, and this is why the partnership with your review provider is so important. And we've Tamara and I have had lots of conversations with clients when their conception of the process is that, well, we're just going to give you everything, you're going to go do it. And we're like, well, no, this is going to be a long process where we're going to strategize together and work through this together and find out what the best process is for you, your strategy, your proportionality and defensibility concerns, and what your goal is at the end of the litigation. Like, what are you trying to get to? And that is the purpose of partnering with an external vendor. Again, from what I was saying at the beginning of the presentation, can you do this by yourself, or are there too many documents and too little time? And then engaging a vendor like Rico to assist with the overall strategy of the review, because it's where our expertise and our technology experts' expertise really does come to play and can significantly affect the overall timeline and costs of a review.
And I really love what you said about collaboration. Throwing it over the fence is just not a strategy. No. Hope is not a strategy, right? And so not only the collaborative nature, but also the educative nature of working in sync and learning from the lawyers that are working on the review side of the review team side, but also from external counsel and internal counsel. I think that's where a lot of the magic comes from, right? It's like everyone's sharing best practices. Yep. Everybody is learning and really getting great education of the process as they move through it, so that they're better in the long run when the next review comes along.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, let's keep going. We're getting close here. We're almost at 11:45. Okay, great. So we're moving on to case briefs, which is always fun because these are real life examples of, briefs that the team has worked on. So go ahead, guys. This is going to be great.
Yeah. So there's a high level overview. We don't have all that much time left, so I'll just go through. We've got 3 to run through. So this first one here, this is a large Canadian energy corporation. This situation was a massive litigation, very high value litigation. So there were, in this scenario, 6 terabytes of data collected. That equated to 5.7 million documents thereabouts. So here the intelligent review team came in at an early stage and made some suggestions, some consultation on some culling strategies at the processing stage, as well as in the promotion into our relativity tool, our review tool, Relativity 1. And that affected about an 80% reduction in review scope. So this still leaves us, a pretty significant number of documents. What is that, about 80%, 1.5g million, something around there?
What, about 1.2 million?
Quick math.
So still significant amount. So what we consulted with the client. What we decided to do was to do a phased active learning review workflow. There's a lot of documents coming in at different times. So we started training a smaller subset of documents, and then as new documents came in, we capitalized on the learnings of the previous phase and went down the line that way, so that the early training, even though we weren't doing all the documents at the same time, the early training was still effective in the later phase and helping reduce the number of eyes on review. So with this one here, so compared to the traditional linear review method, there was the question about, like, would this ever even really be effective nowadays with the volumes? And the answer is no, because this would have cost over $2 million more and 15,000 hours spent, and that would be not even without any quality control having been done, all of that stuff. So this was a significant savings compared to the traditional linear review approach.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
You want to keep going?
Yeah, we'll keep going. Yeah.
Yep, great.
Yeah, so so this is a second example. This is for a national law firm representing an oil and gas company. Again, a large litigation, high value, high stakes litigation. What was collected was 6.2 terabytes of data, similar in size to the previous one that I just mentioned, except this one resulted in 13.2 million documents. There's a number of reasons for that. There's expansion rates. There could have been a lot of zip files and embedded files and things like that. So once you start processing, that's where the true, the face of the project is really in front of you, and you can see very clearly the last one was about 5 million and this one is 13 million. So that's a huge difference in document scope. So in this one, we again were involved at the kind of early stages, and our team consulted with external counsel, and they created together a number, like hundreds of custom searches on top of some processing culling strategies that we put into place. So the combination of those two affected an 85% reduction in document review scope. And here, again, we did a phased active learning review approach. Just with the volume of documents, it's near impossible to have them all kind of, over and processed at the same time. The machine takes time to do it. So we take chunks at a time and start doing a phased active learning based review workflow. It came to be known later in the review that there was some additional requirements that weren't again contemplated. So this is part of the agility that we're talking about. So there was a number of redactions that were going to need to be required to be applied. And so what the team did was they incorporated redaction propagation by using a very complex but effective workflow, which eliminated the need to apply redactions on a significant number of documents. And so this strategy, while already saving, the millions of dollars it would have cost if we had approached it a linear review, which we never would do, right? It's just, it blows my mind, but no, it would never happen. So in addition to that, because of the agility that we're faced with some new challenges through the review and incorporated this complex propagation strategy, we saved an additional almost $350,000 in what it would have cost if we had done that manually.
Fantastic. So yeah, like you said, right, it's not only from the big picture, but also during the actual review project, making those adjustments
exactly.
to get that,
really
that improved result.
Sorry, Tamara?
Sorry, just to get that improved result even during the review. Yeah.
And that's a constant thing that we do see. The team is very hyper vigilant about finding those opportunities throughout the review, and particularly when new issues come up or new scope.
Okay, I think you have one more, and then we'll move into some questions.
Yeah, and then we'll have some time if there's anything. But so this is just the last high-level overview. This is for a national bank, financial institution, and this was one of those non-litigation, which is fairly common response. So this was they were provided with a request for information from the regulatory body into some potential, wayward practices that were happening. And so the bank collected their own documents in this situation. And then we were brought in to bring about an effective review strategy. So they had collected about 2 million documents. This was done with their own methods, their own tools. So we brought over those documents. We again created some custom calling strategies through processing and through our relativity active learning tool once those documents were processed and promoted into it. Here, this was unintentional two-phased active learning-based review because the initial set we had done was for one request, and we had the entirety of the potentially responsive documents to that request, and we ran the active learning review, and it was very successful, and the client was very happy. And then several months later, they received an additional request with additional timelines, and so we called us up, we communicated that with them, and in that consultation we realized, these, even though it's a different timeline and there's a few slight nuances in what they want to know, the concepts are actually the same. So we started a second active learning based review. The client collected the documents that were in the time range, and then we were able to capitalize on the previous active learning project, and then just basically affect some quality control afterwards to really significantly reduce that second phase. And we saved over about $300,000 in that second review phase.
Okay, perfect. No, that's great. Did you have anything to add to this one, Sean?
With respect to kind of all three of them, I think it's important to notice that they're all different.
Yes.
Every single one of them starts from a different collection point. It's a different data size. It's a different document count. The processes that are employed to reduce the initial set of process data are different. The active learning approach is different. And I think that goes to support the idea that it's never going to be a one-size-fits-all solution.
No.
It's always going to be a custom approach to what the data is telling you and what the legal strategy is trying to get to. And the flexibility of a process like intelligent review, the flexibility of a tool like active learning, really does allow us to do all of these things effectively, defensively, and as I said earlier, statistically verifiably. It's not a process by which we're just kind of going out there and coding documents. It's a process that's highly informed, highly iterative, and provable at the end of the day, which gives counsel, I think, or should give counsel a lot of comfort when it comes to a production. That the tool, as I said earlier, is magnifying the inputs of counsel, not reducing them in any way.
Okay, great. Anything left to add, Jess?
No, I'm only just thinking about some of the things that we've done when we were talking about using the tool and manipulating the tool. Like our intelligent review team is so knowledgeable about, the technology and, review strategies that, the team has created some proprietary tools that have, advanced the capabilities of the tool itself. And so we use those strategies throughout, every active learning review, and I just think it's amazing what everybody comes up with, and to just keep making it as efficient as possible.
Okay, great. So we have a couple of questions. I know we're getting into the last 5 minutes here. First question is, when is it best to get a review provider involved? Like at what stage?
Ideally, pre-collections. Ideally pre-collections. And that doesn't necessarily mean that there's, a significant spend involved in bringing a provider in at that point. But I think bringing the provider in at the moment you would put out a legal hold, or the moment that you realize there's something we need to find or respond to, or whatever that is, bringing in at least for the consultation phase, while planning out with your intern, whether you're at a corporation or a law firm supporting your client corporation, that would be the ideal place.
Okay, perfect. A couple more questions. I work in personal injury and review files with various types of records, but not on a very large scale. Do you have any tools for the work of this type of review?
Yeah, for sure. And I think the tools are more flexible now than they've ever been. RICO certainly has a multitude of tools that can be used for different types and different sizes of files. In this particular presentation, we're talking mostly about Relativity 1 because of the integration with Intelligent Review and how the tools and the team work together. That said, as I kind of was mentioning earlier, the data is going to dictate what you do. It's also likely going to dictate what review tool you choose. So there are certainly other tools out there. There are other tools out there supported by RICO that might be more appropriate for a personal injury type of document flow. And my understanding is that there's a lot of repetition in personal injury and the forms that are there when it comes to insurance. So for the purposes of identifying certain types of information, categorizing certain types of information, the tools in Relativity 1 and in other platforms could, again, help to speed up and encourage consistency across a document review of that nature.
Yeah, and that's where the, having consultation comes in too, because it's, like for example, our team can consult with you, again, we're giving these examples of huge reviews, right? But what the tool is, but then also consult with you on how to, oh, I'm getting weird feedback, sorry, on how to create your own review. Even if you're doing it by yourself, you want, or maybe with a junior counsel or something, we can strategize with you and give you some consultation on how to, make that the most effective. And you don't need to use, you don't need to use artificial intelligence. You don't need to use the latest and greatest when you're working with a smaller set. But there are definitely still things you can do that make it effective and easier for you to get through and more effective for your client.
Okay, great. Here's a question. How many docs minimum for a review? Like, what is there a threshold?
I would say that if you're looking to, I don't think there's any threshold for review. As I said earlier, anytime your organization or your firm can't handle the number of documents that need to be reviewed in a timeline, I think you should be reaching out to a vendor just to make your life easier. When it comes to utilizing tools like active learning, for example, honestly, there's no longer a minimum. And I say that because the way that active learning works, one of the ways active learning works is through a tool called the prioritized review queue. And essentially what the prioritized review queue does is it learns in the instant, like all active learning components do. So as soon as you code a document, it has learned something. And it just keeps feeding you the most relevant documents, document after document after document after document, until you've gone through all of the relevant documents in a data set. So it doesn't need to be 1 million, 2 million, 3 million documents. It could be 2,000 documents, 3,000 documents. Like it's the minimum for utilization of this type of tool is, for all intents and purposes, gone now, I would say.
But, but to that point too, the consultation, with the expert will be able to, help you know, okay, well, is it actually, or if you're talking about 10,000 documents, yes, we could do prioritized queue. There are other cost considerations involved in something like that. So, it could come and help you strategize, like which is going to get you where you need to be when you need it and for the most effective price.
Yep, for sure.
One more. We're getting close here to our time. So we're at 11:58. Incredible webinar. The 3 case studies highlight to a great extent large volume files. Are there any benefits, value RICO can provide on smaller volume doc files? So this is sort of along the same line of questioning.
Yeah. And I would say yes. Again, it goes back to utilizing the tool that's most appropriate. Maybe active learning in Relativity 1 isn't the most appropriate tool, and that's fine. There are other tools that we employ on a regular basis to assist counsel that have smaller files. But if smaller is 20 or 30,000 documents, we've used active learning on a file that had 32,000 documents and still realized significant cost savings there.
Yes.
And importantly, we were able to use a much smaller team. We were able to get it done faster. So there are other benefits that come in even on those smaller files. And again, if you're dealing with a smaller file, the likelihood is that the value of the litigation might be lower. The cost sensitivities are higher, and using a tool can again assist in reducing those costs, informing strategy more quickly, and saving the client money overall while getting them a better strategy at the other end of the process.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I just to add to that point, it, you think about data volumes, but really part of the analysis is about what is the data, not how much or
Yeah.
how little do you have, but if it is literally, if you have 30,000 documents you need to get through and it is all emails, the value you're going to get out of using active learning, even on a small set, is going to be exponentially higher than if it's all, scanned PDFs of handwritten notes and things like that. So the analysis that we can bring in understanding that and looking at the data, like that's where we can guide.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great point, Jess. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, we're getting to time. It's, at the top of the hour. So I want to thank you both for sharing your expertise and walking us through this. We just to reiterate for everyone in attendance, this has been recorded and we'll be sharing it back out to everyone. And if there are any questions post-webinar that come to you later in the afternoon, I often have that myself. I might just later, oh yeah, I wish I would have asked that. Just feel
Yeah.
free to reach out and we're happy to address it at any time. But again, thanks everyone for joining us today. Have a great rest of your week. And thank you, Jess and Sean.
Thank you,
Thank
Tamara.
you.
Thanks
Thanks,
everyone for
everyone.
coming.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye.